Dew worms, or Canadian Nightcrawlers, are not native to North America, and there's barely any up here in the wild in northern Ontario. When you want to use them for bait, it can get quite costly up here, so when you fish as much as Dave does, you grow them yourself.
Growing Nightcrawlers is pretty simple. All you need, some black earth. You can get this at just about any nursery, even Canadian Tire. Most of the Loblaws companies carry it. A little bit of leaf litter. We just got this out of the forest here. It's decomposing leaves, sticks, all kinds of good stuff in here. Shredded newspaper. This is just going to help kind of keep a nice balance of moisture in your mix. And of course, some dew worms to start things off. Because we have one, we're going to use an old Rubbermaid container with a lid. Start off just by drilling a few holes into the bottom of the container. The holes are just going to help with airflow throughout the container. We're going to do the same thing in the lid. This method is quite similar to how you would raise red wigglers or vermicomposting worms, which are also good bait. They're just a little bit smaller. And so what we're going to do is start off with some of the shredded newspaper. You can get a decent amount in there. Take some water. There's no set amount of water to use. You just want to moisten things. The holes in the bottom are also going to help with a little bit of drainage. You don't want things sopping wet once you get your little colony established. You just want it moist enough that they're happy. Next, we'll add in some of the leaf litter. Just spread this stuff around. And your newspaper is going to help moisten all of the leaf litter. Once you have a nice layer covering the newspaper, add some of your black earth. Now, when I was a kid, I lived on the banks of the Saugeen River in southern Ontario. An amazing trout river. And that meant that I went through a lot of worms fishing every day. In southern Ontario, I was able to go out into my backyard and pick dew worms every night before I went fishing. And that actually turned into the first business that I ever had when I was probably about 13 years old. We're just going to add some more of the shredded newspaper on top of the black earth. Ironically, this is Canadian Tire newspaper. perfect for lining your worm container with Canadian Nightcrawlers. A little bit more water. More leaf litter. You can see all the decomposing roots and leaves that are in here. We're primarily maple here, so I suspect part of why these dew worms do so great is that they taste like maple syrup. And the fish really like that. Now with that first business that I had a guy down the road selling dew worms as well. And I spoke with a local businessman who actually set up a meeting with me. He ran the movie theater in Hanover, Ontario. And he was interested in investing in my little company. So I went in for that first meeting with him. And he gave me a stack of styrofoam cups. And he told me to sell my worms out of these cups. And also to set my price 25 cents per dozen below the fella down the road. So I did that. And he also charged me 5 cents per cup. So what he said, he gave me this big stack of cups and lids. And he said, okay, take these home, come back next Friday with the stack of cups, and we'll see how many you sold. So I did. I went back next Friday, and with the amount that I had sold, he asked me for $3. $3 was a lot of money then. That got you like 6 chocolate bars or a bunch of popsicles. But Mr. Lyons taught me a few things about business, which isn't the point of this video at all. Just a little bit of history of my worm cultivation, my worm raising. But he kind of inspired me to keep going. And when I was doing this back then, I ended up building out of a huge old dresser with all the drawers, several trays like this that I started breeding dew worms in. And ended up making a decent amount of money. Bought me a bunch of fishing rods, lures, things like that. And we're just going to continue to layer this. This will be the last layer. And for anyone who doesn't know, I really enjoy fishing a lot. I fish just about every day of my life. Fish many different ways, fly fishing, just fishing with worms like this, spin fishing, trolling in a boat, float fishing, you name it, I probably enjoy it. And as folks know, bait can get quite pricey. Which is why I initially started raising worms when I was about 13 years old. Because I didn't have to bug my parents anymore for money for bait. Of course, I did learn to pick dew worms at night. But we can't do that here. Just gonna add a little bit more moisture here. You don't want it to be sopping wet, but you want the entire mix to be comfortable for the worms. And what you'll have to do the first few days, you'll just have to kind of check the mix and make sure that it's not drying out. And the newspaper will really help with keeping it nice and moist. And now comes the best part. Large Canadian Nightcrawlers. And as was mentioned, there is nowhere around here to just go out and pick dew worms. It was quite an enjoyable thing when I was a kid. You'd go out at night, late at night. You were allowed to stay up late so that you could go out, collect worms. And these guys, all you want to do is just lay them down on the surface. These guys have been in the fridge, so they're a little bit docile right now. But they'll start to burrow down in there. And what I always fed them when I was younger was kitchen scraps, salad, things like that. Just spread it around. And outside of that, coffee grounds, used coffee grounds, which they really seem to like. And within a couple weeks, your worms will start to reproduce. And we'll just put this lid on here. We'll let them do their thing. Won't be long before all those worms burrow down into the dirt, into the newspaper, into the leaf litter that is in there, and they'll be happy. They'll be happy little creatures. And really, they'll only have one bad day. Just one bad day. As far as where you should keep your worm bin, they like to be cool. They don't like to be hot. And we have this insulated storage container on the property that we keep our fishing gear in, our camping gear, all that stuff. So it seems fitting to keep these guys in with all of the gear that they will be traveling with in their journeys. And just keep this in here. And every day or two, especially at the beginning, just come in, open it up. You want to make sure they've got food. All the worms have now settled down into the dirt. Within probably 2 to 3 weeks, if you've been successful, you should start to see some very, very tiny little night crawlers start to emerge. And in particular, when it's very cool in the evenings, if you come out to have a look, you can open it up. And you might even see some on top breeding.